Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's issues, news, and trends from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and this evening I'm joined by Mimi Steele, the president of San Francisco Bay Area's CAPR chapter, and we're going to be talking about regionalization and Proposition 31, which is disingenuously called government accountability, or talks about government accountability, but gets into some other things that are a little bit more potentially mischievous behind the scenes. So Mimi, thank you for joining us on the show this evening.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
And so first of all, tell us what CAPR stands for.
Okay. It stands for Citizens Alliance for Property Rights.
Okay.
And the reason I started the organization was that I was concerned with the loss of property rights that we're experiencing in the Bay Area. It's really quite astounding, and a lot of people aren't even aware of it. And the really critical thing is a lot of people don't appreciate how important property rights are to their liberty. Right. And if you look at what the founders used to talk about, they basically said property and liberty are inseparable. And so when your property rights are threatened, your liberty is threatened. And that's why I got involved in this issue.
Right, and they are inseparable. I mean, people don't realize that in other parts of the world, people aren't allowed to own property. And if you lose that ability to own property, then people tend not to fight as much if it's something that's not really theirs anyway.
Absolutely. And the other piece of it, too, is that statistically, something like 70% of businesses are started by home equity loans on people's homes. So if you take away the ability for people to own property and get equity in their homes, you basically kill the engine of American enterprise. You know, Hewlett-Packard, all of the great Silicon Valley people started by taking out loans on their homes.
So not only were they physically developing the business in the garage, they were mortgaging the garage to get the business going.
To get the business.
Yes.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah.
Right. Well, so tell us a little bit about, at a high level, what this Prop 31 is, and then let's talk about the ramifications it has, and let's look at it in context, because there's a major push in the Bay Area, as you said, that people may not be aware of, for more of a regional approach to government as opposed to just having the local control. So we'll get into all those things, but tell us a little bit about Prop 31 and what it looks like and what it really is.
Okay. Prop 31 is ostensibly listed as a budget bill, and it's designed to give you the false impression that the legislatures are going to be much better at managing the budget in the State House than they are now. All we have to do is just pass this little law.
And then magic.
And then magic. It
Yeah.
just happens perfectly. Well, there's a poison pill in this. So part of it is about the budget, but there's a lot of weasel words in there dealing with the budget. For example, the governor can declare an emergency, not defined, at any time, and then just wipe out all of the provisions of this budget bill, supposedly. So that's not good.
You mean so like our current fiscal crisis in California could all of a sudden become an emergency, and then he can do whatever he wants?
Yes. Amazing, isn't it?
Because I can think of an emergency on a daily basis.
I think that's the whole point behind it, is to give the impression that there's more control and that they're going to solve the budget crisis, while in effect they're just making it easier to play with the books. So, but it also contains something that really concerns me the most, and that's what I call the poison pill. And the poison pill in this budget bill has to do with how they allocate the tax money within the region. And right now what happens is most of the money that's collected, for example, from the suburbs stays in the suburbs to fund suburban schools.
Right.
Well, under this proposition, what they'll end up doing is taking the money and pooling it into the region, so that all of the tax money that's going supposedly to support schools, and if you live in a suburban community that you moved to because you wanted the good schools for your children, forget about it, because all that money is going to get distributed, and with the political power of the cities, most of it's going to go back to the cities, and they're going to starve the suburban schools.
Redistribution of wealth and redistribution of education scores.
Yes. Taxation without representation, absolutely.
Right. And so I've talked to people, and even the Republican Party for California originally supported this bill.
Yes.
Because they read the first They read the summary.
They didn't read the fine print.
They didn't read past the 2/3 mark, where the ugliness begins to occur and where the opportunities for regional government start to creep in.
Yes, but what's really interesting about that is that we've approached a lot of the local Republican Party, the county Republican Party people, and through the Conservative Forum, we've reached a lot of people as well. And people are starting to wake up to what really is involved in Proposition 31, and there's a lot of no votes going on in that area.
Right, and I know that that there are sticker campaigns and things to help revise the door hangers for the Republican Party and that as well. But it's not just Republicans that are against this bill, right?
Correct. This bill has really made strange bedfellows of political people. There are a lot of people on the opposite side, on the left, if you will, that are opposed to the bill, but they're opposed to it for different reasons. They don't like what they consider the constraints on the budget.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But we're opposed to it because of the regionalization of the tax.
Okay. Okay, so talk to us a little bit about the ramifications and the context of Prop 31. Obviously, regionalization is something you and I have known each other for some time. Disclosure is out. But we've been kind of fighting against these regional types of organizations who are pooling money, being very domineering with how cities can behave in order to get money with strings attached. And they're looking at other tax components as well, such as they're evaluating currently a mileage tax where they can put a GPS in California, in Northern California cars within the 9 Bay Area counties and charge 10 cents per mile for people driving around the area, where this is just insanity. It's already too expensive to live here. This is chasing business out as it is. They're adding more, and this will give those kinds of organizations more power.
Exactly. So let me just give you sort of the brief history. The regional governments were formed in the 80s for the purpose of dealing with transportation funds. And what they were formed for made a lot of sense. You want to make sure that a road in Alameda County connects to a road in Contra Costa County. So that was strictly related to transportation and how the federal funds got presented out to the different counties around the Bay Area. They've unfortunately morphed into this big behemoth of an organization. They've connected themselves with an organization called the Association of Bay Area Governments, which supposedly represents the cities. And between the Association of Bay Area Governments and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which is doing the transportation funds, what they have done is they have come down to cities and they have dictated to them how much housing they have to build. Mm-hmm. And so this is completely the opposite of the way our government is supposed to work. Our government is supposed to work with the maximum power at the individual level, and then at the city level, and then at the county level, and on up. Well, what's happening is we've turned that triangle on its head. And we're giving more and more power to the regional government. So the question you have to ask as a citizen is, where do I go to vote these people out if they don't do what I want?
Well, there's the catch.
And that's the catch. You can't vote them out. They're all bureaucrats. And even the Association of Bay Area Governments, which is composed of elected officials, they're not elected to that position. Right. And there are only 2 people from each county dictating for all of the cities in their county and for all the cities in the Bay Area. And so what we have found is they have a plan that they're working. It's called the One Bay Area Plan, or Plan Bay Area. And it's going to dictate for the next 25 years where all the transportation money goes and where all the housing goes. Mm-hmm. You have unelected bureaucrats coming down to your city and telling you how many very low income, medium income, and higher income people have to be accommodated in your city. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're in a city that has some space to grow, like Santa Clara or San Jose, that's not as much of a problem. But if you're in a city like Saratoga or Corte Madera or Tiburon, where there really isn't that much place to grow, they're forcing people to accept these additional housing units.
Well, it's not force. they just won't give you any money for your roads if you don't do it.
That's right. Catch-22.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard a term in a debate recently, trickle-down government. It seems to apply in this scenario.
Yeah, except it's not trickling at
No,
this point.
It's
like
on full force.
It's the boot on your throat that's coming at us.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting about this is that when we started looking into what the Bay Area governments were doing, we found a document that said that the purpose of this regional housing needs allocation, which is where the numbers come from, it's called the RENA allocation. The purpose of it is the 175% income redistribution. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to social engineer you. They're trying to make sure that every city in every county in the Bay Area has its fair share of every income level. Mm-hmm. That people, any new housing built is built along mass transit corridors. It's built in what we call a stack and pack configuration, where you have units on the first floor that are business units,
retail,
business,
yeah.
And on top you have housing. And then the concept is that you live close to where you work, and they're going to build livable communities for you. And so you would be able to walk to work or take a bike or get on BART, and your whole environment would be limited to this 5 or 10 mile radius. I mean, it's completely utopian and it's completely unrealistic. And what will happen, again, tying in Prop 31, is that'll accelerate the process even faster than it's going right now. It'll give these regional organizations even more power than they have.
Right. Now, you're not against people living in those situations if they want to.
Absolutely not.
But if you have the opportunity to live in the suburbs and get a better education and, work in, this conceptual framework works fine if everyone works at retail rates or wages. But if you want more white-collar types of opportunities or things where real money can be made, then you're going to have to figure out another way to get to work or never go into work or whatever. But if everyone's unemployed, then the commute is much shorter.
Well, that's right. Well, the other piece of this is, too, the people who are doing this planning, all of this top-down central planning, right? Mm-hmm. They assume that people are interchangeable. You're not an individual. I work in the high-tech business. I'm not interchangeable. What I do is not something that you can just grab another person who even fits my profile and plug them into my job. It's a very highly specialized skill. And I live in the East Bay. So if you take the policies that these people are promulgating to the next level, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that maybe I live in the East Bay, I can't work in Mountain View.
Right.
Or maybe I have to find a job in the East Bay, closer to my house.
Right.
Or maybe if I was going for a job in Mountain View against another candidate who happened to live closer, maybe the company would be incented to give the job to that other person. So there are a lot of ramifications to this that people have no concept of, and the bottom line is it takes away your freedom of choice. It forces everybody into this little box. You're not an individual, you're part of the collective, you're an interchangeable cog. And when you go to these meetings, they even talk about workers and worker villages.
Yes.
Like
human settlements.
Human settlements. That's another great term that we hear a lot.
It is good for you, don't worry.
It is good for you, yes. Yes, unfortunately, I did a lot of this goes by the term smart growth and sustainable development.
I always put not so in front of those things, but...
Right, you're exactly right. There was a new book that just came out by a gentleman named Stanley Kurtz, and it's called Spreading the Wealth. And it talks about the redistributive agenda that's coming along as part of this whole process. Well, what he didn't say in that book was that California is already there. The rest of the country, it hasn't hit yet, but we are definitely the canary in the coal mine.
We're trailblazing. Absolutely.
We are. And so for those people that are watching that are suburbanites, I really want to tell you that that if these kinds of plans go forward, you are going to see a drastic change in your lifestyle and the lifestyle that your children are able to pursue. And a lot of people think, oh, it won't happen to me. It'll just happen to low-income people, or it'll happen to somebody else. But they are after your car. They're after your house.
Yes.
They just want to put everybody in little boxes and move along.
Well, and the interesting thing is a lot of the numbers that they're using to base their assumptions upon are complete vapor in the first place or are completely inaccurate. And so we were out harassing some local officials recently, and we found out that they were basing their climate development plans, which plays all into this regional thing and their allocation and how they have to have the housing units, et cetera, and reduce greenhouse emissions in their area. And because of a law, AB 32, they were required to bring down the greenhouse levels to 1990 levels. Great. Where are the measurements from 1990? Well, we don't have any measurements from 1990. Well, how did you come up with it? Well, we took 96 and made some estimates about how much was going on, and we reduced it by 15%. Great. Where are the measurements from 96? Well, we didn't have measurements in 2006 or whatever it was. So what you're telling us, this is all based on flawed information. No, we got it from CARB, which CARB is California Air Resources Board, who completely made stuff up too. And so all of this is being driven by false measurements that never existed. It's all formulations, no offsets for green vegetation that's offsetting the carbon or anything else. And also, if you look at some of the measures that this One Bay Area plan you're talking about are based upon, I was looking at it, and since 1990, there's been 3.4 million people leaving California. Thousands more jobs in the last 2 weeks have been announced that they're going away because it's too expensive to do business in California. But they're expecting 24% growth of the population by 2035 in the Bay Area. Based on what? Numbers pulled out of various orifices, under desks, or whatever.
Yes, there's an organization in Sacramento called the Housing and Community Development Organization, and these are bureaucrats, and they come up with a number, and the number bears no resemblance, as you're saying, to anything that's really happening in the real world. It's just a number that some bureaucrat picked out. The other point I want to make, for those that are concerned about the environment, and everybody should be concerned about the environment, I understand that, but supposedly this is being done to help the environment, and yet if you build to their specs, they waive all of the environmental requirements. So really, this is not about the environment. This is about control and social engineering. And I think it's really important that people understand exactly what they're being asked to do. They're being asked to make sacrifices for things that are not real. They're being asked to give up their liberty to protect the environment. And I mean, the other side of that, I would say, is the places that have the best record of protecting the environment are the capitalist countries. The places that have the worst records are places like China and Russia, where the land didn't belong to anybody. It belonged to everybody, so nobody took care of it. So personal responsibility and husbanding your resources is a better way to deal with property than putting it under government control.
Yep, because if you own it, you're more likely to take care of it. And even on a micro level, if we look at it, and all this money being redistributed to the cities, and by the way, even after they waive the CEQA requirements, the California Environmental Quality Act stuff, and allow these construction projects to occur, now you're putting high densities of carbon-emitting humans into a small area, and that's going to be better for the environment? Not so much. But if you look also at the fact that your model of look at the capitalistic types of areas where people own their own property and take care of things, look at the suburbs versus the cities.
Perfect.
And so if we want all of the suburbs to look like the cities, all we have to do is put everyone into the same pile and not let them have the freedom to choose where they live and make the money they want to make, and there you have it. So it's totally counter to what the proposed direction is going to be. Now, you talked about transportation and the money being allocated to these things through these regional types of organizations. Couldn't we do things like change the ridership of transportation, or change the way that transportation is done, or give people more options so that it's less expensive so they wouldn't need so much money? So, for example, empty buses riding around with just the driver might be something that could be adjusted?
I hope they would, but unfortunately, if you look in the plan, what they have in the plan for the next 25 years is no additional funding for roads, and all of the funding going to buses and light rail and heavy rail, things that are the most cost ineffective forms of transportation. So what they're trying to do, again, back to control, they're trying to squeeze you. They don't like the fact that people drive cars. They don't like the fact that you have freedom of movement. Movement is part of liberty, right? And if you have to get on a bus to go somewhere, think of how much time you're going to waste. How are you going to carry your groceries? Somebody sent me an email recently saying, hey, you know, you didn't even mention the fact that I have to get on the bus and there's people that I wouldn't really want to associate with, and there are crime issues and all kinds of things like that. You have a lot more control when you're in your own car.
Yeah.
And so that's
people with cooties. I mean, we've all ridden around in an airplane and come back with a cold or something. And those are, you know, not always the same people that are on the bus.
Yeah.
So, yeah, wild times ahead. So we have a few minutes left. Tell us a little bit more about what we need to know about Prop 31, if there's anything that we might have missed that people should be aware of, and why they need to get out there and say no to this thing.
I think the biggest thing is to realize that it's not in our best interest to vote for Prop 31. Our best interest is to vote no on Prop 31 to make sure that the Sacramento gets the message that we don't want regional control. Even if Prop 31 does not pass, I want to encourage people to get involved in property rights issues. There are lots of people around the Bay that are starting to wake up to this. We're trying to stop the One Bay Area plan. They can go to my website and sign up for my free emails. We talk about events that are happening around the Bay that are affected by property rights. Unless people start standing up for this, we're losing them, and we're losing them very fast. We're at a very critical point. And while there's a lot of issues going on in the country right now, I chose this issue because it's something that I can impact. It's local. If you go to your city council and talk to your mayor and get involved with the city planners, there's a lot you can do. You don't quite have as much or any power for people that are running for Congress or running for the president, but This is something you can do in your community.
Perfect. Last 10 seconds or so, what's your website?
My website is bayarealiberty.org.
Thanks for joining us, Mimi.
Thanks, Chris.
And at this point, we're going to stop for a quick announcement from our underwriter, the Conservative Forum.
constitutional law attorney. And they say, oh really, what kind of constitutional law attorney? I said, well, I'm the true kind, the kind that believe that the Constitution is what the Constitution says and what it was intended to say. Anything beyond that is tyranny and should not be allowed.
So let's come to this, my friends. You ready? The second American Revolution against a ruling class that simply lectures but does not listen or defend the American people. It is government versus the people. Am I right? Yeah. Look at the Electoral College example. Right? A leftist popular challenge to states' rights. You think the founders were brilliant people? Did they not know what they were doing by carefully calibrating to get the small states and the big states to come together? Why does Wyoming get 2 senators in California? Actually, I'd rather have Wyoming's 2 senators.
Welcome back to The Right Side. Again, we'd like to thank our underwriters, the Conservative Forum, for making the show possible. We like to tell people also about the presentations that they host at the Conservative Forum. You can find out more about them at theconservativeforum.com, and they host their meetings on a monthly basis. It's usually the first Tuesday of each month at 432 Steerland Road here in Mountain View. And they have speakers coming up, such as in November, it's an election watching party. So by the time we tape again, we will have a new president in office, or we will be celebrating the re-election of Mr. Obama. But that night we'll also have Veterans Appreciation Night. Veterans are free to attend the forum, and John Caviani, who's a Medal of Honor recipient, will be speaking that evening. In December, there's a Christmas party, which will be we'll be joined there by Armstrong and Getty. In January, from the Ayn Rand Institute is Yaron Brook. In February, Kevin Jackson of the BlackSphere.net fame will be there. In March, a panel discussion on education. In April, Hillsdale College joint event featuring Dr. David Bobb. So if you can join us at the Conservative Forum, I'm sure you'll learn a lot there as well. In closing, I'd just like you to think about the idea that regionalization and many facets of our government that you may not be aware of are going to potentially have an impact on you based on the way you vote in the upcoming election. So please be an informed voter. Go get your ballot, read what's in there, read the fine print, go beyond the summaries, because what you'll find is that the summaries are not always summarizing the full context of the bill and what you may be subjected to if you vote yes. They're often written deceptively and titled deceptively, and you don't get what you think you're getting. So do your research. And we also encourage you to join us again on The Right Side. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and we'll look forward to seeing you in person or on the show again sometime soon. Thanks again.